Okay, so with all our sanding and filling done, obviously we've got some green areas. What we're going to do is just going to get some acrylic grey paint, it doesn't matter what it is, and we're going to paint over them. Now this isn't just to make it look nice and to get rid of the grey, because what we're going to do when that's totally dry, we're going to sand over it and see if any green pokes through. Now if there's green poking through, then we know there's still a little bit of sanding still to do. Now you could spray this and things like that as you go, but I tend to do it with a bit of grey paint by hand because it's a lot quicker, saves getting the airbrush out and all the rest of it. The other thing it also helps with, when you do come to spray and prime and things like that, it gives a little bit more of a coat because the actual filler is quite porous. It will absorb your paint. So if it's already sucked in quite a lot of paint, it will make it not quite as porous. It won't swallow all your paint, and away you go. And the other thing obviously this is doing is slightly acting as a filler as well, because it's going to be filling in all those little holes, the little pinprick holes that we've missed. So we've got that. Also I've just got to do a touch down in here. Just give that a bit of a brush. Right, and we can leave that to one side to dry. So okay, what we're going to do, we're going to just test fit how we go. Now, one thing that will certainly help you out, if you get your file, quite a coarse side, make sure you're flat to it like this, okay, and give a rub. Okay, and then you can obviously do the same on the top and work it back a little bit. And then what you can do, you can then just test fit, see how it looks, because sometimes you find this is slightly higher. As I find, I'm just finding this side seems to be a little bit higher, so we're just going to sand off that side just a little, and then we're just going to test fit that back in and just see how it looks. And we've got a pretty good join there, it's a pretty good height. The big thing is if you can sand it down and get it to the right height difference, it will make a world of difference for actually sanding and filling. It's still a little bit high. So what we'll do is we'll just sand off a little more, and it goes again. And then run your finger over, and I'm actually very, very happy with that fit. So what we do, we just sit the entire front part of the cockpit on as well. So we're all happy with how everything's sitting, and you can check, and like just down in here, there's a small gap appearing, and what it is, it's this part just here isn't sat in totally correctly. So what we're going to do, sand this down a little. Just to take some height off, because any gaps we can get rid of that are on a sort of corner like this, if you can dry fit them to make them right, you will save yourself a vast amount of time. Now I don't know if you can see that, but that's by dry fitting in here, this join, and there's very little of it to show. So I think what we'll do is we're going to move on, and we're going to actually not use the super glue because it's such a good fit. So what we'll do, we're going to get some rubber bands and we're just going to lock it into the middle here. Obviously avoiding the instrument panel. Now the trouble is, because of the leading edge extensions, they tend to be a bit like razor blades, and they tend to cut your rubber band, so you have to be a bit careful like that. Lock the front part in as well, and we're just going to stick a rubber band around the front part just to hold it in place, nothing else. And then what we can do, we can sort of push and fit and pull and everything until you've got a join where you're really, really happy with it. And I'm very, very happy with that, if you can see in there, that really we can get away with using no filler if we're lucky. So I'm quite impressed with that gap. Now the other thing as well, when you're putting rubber bands on, it's always nice if you can sort of do it in a way that holds things all together, so when you let go the glue doesn't actually move. So if you do things like this, I used to have some lovely really thick rubber bands, but unfortunately they've long since gone. So by having a band top to the bottom, it's pulling it all together. So what we're going to do, we're just going to push and make our joins as best as we can. Like that. Fraction over still. And I don't know if you can see there, but this join in here is a very, very nice join, and it's really unnoticeable. So what we're going to do, we're going to get our extra thin, and we're going to get it in there, and obviously we're going to run it, let the capillary action take it down this part in here, and we're only going to run as far as the extension. We're not going to go any further because we'll deal with all this after this is all totally dried. So we do the same on the other side. Now I'm not saying that's going to be an absolute perfect fit, but it's certainly a hell of a lot better than it would have been. So there we go, we're all in there, and I think you'll agree that is near to a perfect dry fit on a joint like that than you're going to get anywhere. So I'm very, very happy with the way that's turned out. So we'll let that dry now, let it go totally hard, and then we'll get this front side sorted out. Okay, so all we're going to literally do is glue this front in. So what I've done is I've put a band down the side. I've already done one little pass, and we're just going to put a drop of glue running around the front. Now this particular joint at the front here has always been a nasty one, so we're going to get the filler out once that's dried, give it a little bit of sanding and a bit of filler job. It really does make the difference. It's such a noticeable area, it's almost impossible to hide it. So we're going to get that done. So in a moment I'll knock up some filler, get that on, then we'll let it totally dry and then we can sand it. Okay, being a bit of a wally, I forgot to put two pieces in. The coping should have gone in first. It does go in, it's a bit of a tight fit, and obviously this rear part here, but if you slide it down the back part there first, obviously so you're a bit nearer the front, you can then, he says, try not to, the sticks off, you can slide it back like that and up into position. Takes a bit of fiddling, but it does go. But obviously if I was you, I would do it first and you won't have that trouble. So what we'll do, we're just going to go a little bit of glue, let the capillary action of that run everywhere. Same with this front coving as well, just to drop each side, just to make sure it doesn't move. Then what we've got is the rear part which sits on top. Now it's one of those things, if you've done it right and sanded it, it will just sit there absolutely perfect as it does. Then all I do is a generous blob of extra thin down in here and let the capillary action run its way to the back, and then you can just push it gently into position. Now what you want to do is not touch that at all, because if you manoeuvre it round, it tends to sink in a little bit too far and then you have loads of trouble with it. But that's in just like that. So we'll let all this entire area dry, and we're going to paint these bits up black, and then we can sand and rescribe anything we need at the front here that perhaps we've done a little bit wrong, and just to tidy up all the bits and pieces. Now in the meantime, I've already taken out the centre seam on the clear parts, and obviously I've just masked them up. Now centre seam, there's a video on the site, just pop off and watch that. Okay, to bring you up to speed, all I've done is sanded and filled, and we just got a little bit of rescribing to do down around this leading join as it comes in, and also I've painted black on here. Now what we're going to have to do is just rescribe a couple of little faint lines that we've actually managed to sand away, and just to sharpen them up so when the wash goes on it's still nice and sharp. Okay, so we've rescribed everywhere and put it all in. Now unfortunately in here we've obliterated completely a panel. Now there's nothing left. Now this is where your, as I've got here, what we call a tri-tool scribing set, because you obviously, I'll put another one here somewhere, you get all these shapes and various bits and pieces which all come in very handy, obviously in circles and squares and rectangles, and this one's got some very odd shapes and bits and pieces. So you can then use it to go round. Now this is where you use a type of scribing tool. Now this doesn't have to be an expensive way of doing it, but what you could do, obviously we've got our pin vise here, which I usually, you know, put my drill bit in and away we go like that. But you could just stick a needle in the end there and use that for going round it, or you can have a dedicated sort of pointy scriber like I've got here. I've also used things like a sharp end. If you've got a file with a very sharp end, you could lightly go around with it and just gently build it up. So what we're going to do, we know roughly how big it is, this one in here, because it's still got some marks in it here behind the old pizza box. So what we do, we're going to go along until we find the right sort of shape and size of the one it is, and that's that one like that. We hold it in place and then we just get our scribing tool and we lightly, you know, we're not scratching hard, we're just lightly rubbing it round the outside. The best way so you can see it as well, if we try and bring it in a little bit more, like this, okay, and then you're lightly scratching, if you like, all the way round, just on the outside, and building it up so you're actually digging down, and then the further you get in there, the more you'll just pop round like that until you're in a, I know you can't, it's very hard to show you and do it at the same time really, but as you see we're sort of doing this type of motion all the way round, and then say when you get a good groove you can sort of speed up and then just keep going at it. Every now and again take your out and just give it a rub and get any excess off the end, and that'll make a nice clean scratch, because all you're doing is scratching down. So you start off lightly and then get heavier. I hope you can see that, if you can, but we've got quite a nice little one going in. Now it's quite rough at the moment, so we give it a quick, just a light sand with a medium, bit like that. Then we take our PVA glue, like so, and we'll let that go in, and what that's going to do is eat all the little bitty bits all around the outside and make it in. You can see what we've done now a little bit better because it's darkened it up. And it just puts it back in there, and obviously if it had been a circle or any other shape we could have done just the same, but by putting the glue on, and say it melts it, makes it into a nice even panel line instead of being something quite sharp and horrible. Okay, so one of the next things we can do is get the tails together. Now unfortunately, although it's not a problem, inside here you've got lots of ejector pin marks and there's little bumps and lumps all over it. So if you get your file, keep it flat and just give it a rub over and you'll feel them where they are. But because you're putting two flat areas together, you want a very nice finish on these insides, and we want them flat. But these ejector pin marks, they stick up a little bit, and then what happens is obviously when you put it together you get a gap, and you know you have to push them together and things like that. But by just keeping your file flat, obviously mind the locating pins on this side, just go round those and you can take off any sharp little bits all there. Then all I do, if you get your cement and just blob a lump in the areas, and then as you're pushing together just lay them on to start with. Okay, then pinch from the middle like that, because obviously it'll squeeze to the outside. Now if you're holding the outside like this and you've got your fingers cupped over it, any that come out would run down and you end up with a fingerprint. So keep your fingers away from the edge. As I say, because it's the thin glue, it does tend to spread. So we're just going to do the seams as well, just to weld all those up. And then if you tap just your brush on the gap at the back here, clamps, and just clamp it on, it'll squeeze all that together and just hold it all in place, and you can leave it like that. Job done. Right, at the same time I've also put together all the little flap and aileron little activators at the back here, Obviously I've just cleaned them up. There's a couple of ejector pin marks on the insides of these, but they're easily sandable. And obviously you've got the main where you've got the navigation light as well, which is the big thick one. Now with the kit you have two choices. You can have it obviously flaps and up or down. Now when the Hornet is powered down, the ailerons as well, they all sink down, obviously with a loss of hydraulics. Now depending on how you're going to obviously position your model, perhaps you want it flaps up, is it use the different ones. Obviously if you want it powered down and shut down type of thing, you'll be using it with all the flaps down, and obviously just follow the instructions and it gives you a call for both. Now we're doing them quite early in the build because these need to be on and dry and very, very firm. Because obviously when we come to glue the flaps and the ailerons on, we want them to be rock hard, completely dry. Otherwise you'll end up with them bending and pulling down and various bits like that. So we're just going to clean these up a second, just like that. There we go, so we'll leave that off to one side to dry. Then obviously in here you've got your holes for it. They're nice big locating holes, and then obviously it starts with the thickest one, goes on to the inside in like this, and then obviously you have the thinner one. So if we just start it here, so we're just going to put a drop of extra thin. We'll get our big thick one. We're just going to pop that on like that. Now with this one it's slightly easier than the C version, the Hasegawa, because they tend to be very small, very fiddly. So we'll do the same on the other side. But these are quite nice because they're big and thick. Now you just want to make sure they're all square and sat up. And then obviously on this one it's the slightly smaller one. That fits in there. Then once you've got it on there, if you're using the extra thin, if you come along and just give it a drop and let the capillary action sort of run it all the way down, it'll weld it up. Now for the next one over, which is the big one, which is next to obviously where the wing join is, you have to look at the end of it and look for the little triangle which has got the little light, which will be on the outside. So what we'll do, we'll drop a glue on there, this is the right one, and we're just going to sit that on for a second, just like that. And then the last one is a little thin one, and that goes to the outside. Holds on. There we go, and the little bumps, nodules on the end of them all, they all fit to the outside, they all look outwards. Okay, so we've just fitted the HUD in place, a couple of drops of normal glue, and then obviously the glass parts in. Now we need that to dry. We also put a little blob just on the inside of green, the clear green, to give that sort of look. As you look through, hopefully it will go green. We're going to let that dry off, and then we're going to fix the canopy on. Which is pretty much a straightforward job, because all we'll do, we'll pop the back part on like this, and then we can fit the front part in like there to make our join. Now the reason we do it together, like that, is that then you've got the line up perfect. So if you've got the canopy down, because otherwise if you do it like this way and you say, right, okay, I'm going to line it up, put it here, you glue it and everything's fine like that, and then you might come along and you put the back part in and you might find there's a small gap. And then obviously it's a bit late to try and change it. Obviously if you're using something like a PVA glue which you can pull off and reset, you don't really have any problems. But perhaps if you've used a CA or another type of glue you're using, you may have a lot of problems. So always fit the main part of the canopy in and then butt the front part into it. That way I know when we come to take this off, that's in the perfect place. Just a little thing there to help you out, because many a times that you see sometimes got a great looking model, you look at it, usual thing, canopy doesn't quite fit. Looks always a little bit unsightly, and these are the types of things when you're looking at a model and people look at your work, it's an area where you're drawn to with the clear parts. If they're extra bright, extra shiny, it looks all, it sort of draws your eye towards it. Even if you've got fantastic, perhaps decals on there, very colourful, things like that, your eyes are always drawn onto sort of shiny bits. Glasswork is a classic, so if you've got good glasswork and it's nice and clear, then you'll be fine with it. Now these days I'm using this stuff. This is called Gator Glue. I've got the details on the site where you can get it from. Now the beauty with this stuff is, if you imagine a PVA that dries rock hard, this is what this stuff does. It's very, very strong. It doesn't dry completely brittle so you can sand it as well as you could perhaps a CA glue or something like that, but certainly it is a very good glue. I've used it for the first time on this model and found that it works very, very well. I've used it in testing on a few little other bits of clear parts, various bits, photo etch parts as well. Now I'm always tend to use my slower setting sort of CA glue. But I found using this stuff, you can maneuver it all round a little bit better. You don't have to worry about it biting, getting those little white marks, things like that. So what we're going to do, we're going to use it on this clear part. So you could use a brush. Obviously I'll just use a cocktail stick like this, and then I'll do my usual way of just tracking it around the clear part, bottom where it's going to join. The thing you notice with it is it's not as thick as your standard type of PVA glues. So that's on, we've got that in there, and we're going to push fit that straight on, just check our line up, that's all good. And then obviously because it is a type of PVA, we're just going to pop along with our cotton bud, holding that in. I'm just going to wipe off any excess, just like that. And we'll just make sure we're all centered up there nicely. Okay, front part is on, that's cleared on and done. Now we've got the back. Now there is a part that goes in here, but it doesn't make any difference to the outward join. So what we want to do is get this cockpit sealed up to protect it from either getting knocks, oversprayed, filled up with anything. So what we're going to do it our usual way. We're going to use it itself. Obviously we've got a couple of lumps and bumps. We can put some modelling clay or your blue tack, whatever you're going to use onto it. So say just make a little peak, just like that, and like that. So then when this goes on, you can feel it. I want to make it taller than the object, just like so. Okay, then that will go down and push down and on. Just hold it there for a sec, and that's on there, and that will protect it. We will get a slight bit of overspray in there, but the thing is I quite like it because that's how the real aircraft have it. They always get a slight line, and it gives you a little fuzzy type line underneath there where you get the join from the black to, obviously in this case it's going to be grey on the outside. Now the beauty with that is it gives a nice blurred edge, so it's not like a hard edge where you see some people have done it with a brush and things like that, but it's just a nice way, because obviously in real life obviously the crew's getting in and out, they're knocking off the paint anyway, and it does it all in one and saves you a job. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to clean up these leading edges here, and then we're going to fit all the actual flapper-ons and leading edge extensions, leading edges of the flaps and various bits and pieces, and we're going to get those all fitted on. So basically these are just going to fit on. Now this is a case where you're going to have to check your references, because obviously they all do droop down slightly. Also, if you need a little bit of filling job just in there, then I'd recommend doing it now, because sometimes you get a gap, and it will just take care of that and make it all look nice. Basically these are going to go on and droop down a little bit. Then obviously we've got these back ones to go on as well, and make sure the actuators underneath are nice and dry, because if they are still slightly soft and moving around, leave them for a little bit longer, because when you're putting these on, they have a habit of bending them, and if these bend out of shape, that looks wrong and it all looks wrong. So okay, we're going to get them on. Now obviously this is where you're going to have to check your references. Just do that moment. This is where you have to check your references, because obviously the amount of actual, the degrees of drop obviously depends on each actual aircraft, because obviously depending on how well the hydraulics are and how tight the system is, depends on how much it's going to drop. So I tend to always just make a sort of rough estimate of where it's going to be, you know, as a sort of a generic type thing. So what we're going to do, we're going to drop just a few drops of our nice thin glue along that edge, just like that, to build up a bit of a layer of it. Then we'll take our part now, click it on the top so you're too high, almost a bit like that, and then drag it down like that, and then just wiggle it up and down a few times, and you'll feel it get tighter and tighter as you do it, because what you're actually doing is sort of welding it in, and you can let go. It's that easy, that simple, and you'll get a nice join along the bottom, and along the top. Then you can obviously angle it exactly what degrees you want it down, and you can go like that. But if you do this wiggling business, what it actually does is you're sort of rocking it and welding the join where it's soft plastic and making it into position. So if we just do the same on the outer side again, so you just run a bit of glue around the top. Okay, make sure you're all clicked in, and then just rub it up and down just a few times, and you'll feel it get thicker and thicker as you do it. And then obviously you want it to be the same degrees as your other one, and you can let go. And that's it, it's that simple. It's not anything tricky or technical or anything like that. But if you wiggle it, it'll say it'll get hard to do it. Now if you use just to hold and let go, the chances are it's going to slightly fall down. But because you sort of almost welded it in position manually, you've done it like that. Now normally I'll do the other side and then let that go off and then move on. But for argument's sake, we're going to do the back. Now you could use a little bit of CA glue to put those in and then do it like that, and away you go. The only trouble is this is one area where if you're going to be taking it to shows, if you're going to be moving it around, it might get knocked. So it is worth using the welding type glue on this, because that way it's going to be a lot stronger join. Now just fit in one, and then you'll have to probably maneuver around to get it into the other. And all you do, we're all in like that, and that's it, it's in. Now at the moment, say you've got a big gap, but we've got covers to go over the top. So we've got that one in, so what we'll do, we're going to give it a bit of glue just each side, let the capillary action work its way around and let that weld shut. Now this is where personal preference comes in. I've put these on now. Now I know a lot of model makers will put that on afterwards. They'll use them all as separates. You'll have your fuselage section perhaps like this, and they'll leave rudders off and all the other bits and pieces, and then final assembly they'll come together and put them all together. Now I like to build them a bit like the actual aircraft are done in real life, i.e. they're in this position. So you're going to get shadows perhaps where the crews can't paint because of the actual droop, obviously flaps and ailerons and things like that. And I just like to build them in one whole. So when I'm weathering, so when I'm doing, everything is equal. Now that's my personal preference. If you want to do it separately, by all means, I'm not wanting to do it, it's just the way I actually do it. So if you do want to do it in separate parts and then put it all together at the end, by all means go ahead. It's the same way as I do the cockpits. I always put them on and do them on. I know a lot of people do the glass work and literally they put a few tiny drops of PVA and put the glass work on, and away you go. If you're happy with doing it that way, that's fine. I like to make sure all the joins are in and everything's okay, and that way I get a nice even balance, if you like, when I'm painting and spraying. But obviously it is personal choice, and how people do it, it really is up to you. This is just the way I do it. So what we're going to do, we're going to put the outer one on as well. Now obviously there's quite a large area on this one, and this will be the one, if any of them, where you're going to have a little bit of a problem, because sometimes this butts up against it. Now obviously I'm bearing in mind this lower one is still wet. Whoops, so what we're going to do is flip it over so I can see it a little bit better. I'm going to get that in and get those in, and we're all happy. Okay, so those have been drying now for the last sort of half an hour, and we're pretty firm and they don't move too much. So now all we've got to do, we can move that inside, is put these covers on. Now literally they just sit on. So it's one of those things where you can place it on those little grooves and they sit on there quite nicely. The only thing you need to make sure of is that you sand the little tabs, obviously where it's attached to the sprue, because if it's not flat, they don't sit very nicely and you're going to get a gap and it's going to look a bit odd. So all we're going to do is drop of glue on those, just like that. There's little grooves on the back, they'll line up, and they literally just sit. Now just to make sure this doesn't go anywhere, I'm going to put a drop of glue, very, very small amount, and let the capillary action pull up and down that line and weld it in. The reason I'm using just a little bit is obviously I don't want it to melt, because obviously it might melt through. So we're going to do the same on the outer covers as well. Now these are always a little bit more fiddly how they go on. So these are just going to sit in here. and drop in. Same thing, make sure they're sanded off, otherwise it's not a nice fit. But as you can see, they're on there now, those little covers.